Have you ever played Stardew Valley and thought, man, I wish there was some more action? Or have you ever played a dungeon crawler and thought, this is great, but I really wish I could open up my own shop? Well, this game actually has all of this. I'm Sam the Ashen, and this is Moonlighter. With over 14,000 reviews on Steam sitting at very positive, this game isn't exactly an obscure game, but it is an indie game, and I would also say that it's been forgotten. Most of that is due to because it was released 6 years ago in 2018, but with new games coming out every year that are still pixel-based graphics, it would be hard to say that these are outdated. Moonlighter is an action-adventure RPG dungeon crawler roguelite. That description spells out a lot of the game, but there's still a few things that are pretty crucial to the core of the game, but we'll start with the basics. You play as a young boy that has a big curiosity of the dungeons right on the outskirts of town. You live with your grandfather, who owns the Moonlighter, a shop that sells rare trinkets and artifacts. Since Grandpa is getting a little too old to run the store and to dungeon crawl, he asks you to run the shop. This also includes stocking up with things to sell, which come from exploring the dungeons. This creates a beautiful gameplay loop of dungeon crawling and coming back to stock up the shop and sell your hard-earned treasures, so that you have money to upgrade your shop, invite new businesses into town, and to get new and improved gear to help you delve further and further into the dungeons, which also lets you further uncover the secrets of the mysterious dungeons while getting better and rarer treasures. The combat is pretty simple, especially at first. The dungeons are room-based and randomized, so you go into the dungeon and clear out a room, pick a direction, and then clear it out as you go. As you go deeper, the layouts of the rooms change as well, with more and more environmental hazards like pits to fall into, poisonous liquids spilled out onto the floor, and of course, tougher enemies. There's also a good amount of weapon variety, each with their own movesets and specials. For the sword and shield, it's quick and it does pretty average damage, but you can also block attacks, giving you some more survivability. Or the bow, that isn't super strong, but it lets you attack from further away, with a charge shot that can pierce multiple enemies. Or the greatsword, which is my personal favorite, that is slower and decreases your movement speed a little bit, but it hits like a truck and has a whirlwind ability that hits all around you multiple times, and it gives you iframes while you're swinging. There's plenty of variety here in movesets and weapons, which keep things nice and fresh. The enemy variety is nothing to scoff at either. There's over 80 unique enemies spread throughout the dungeon, with a lot of variety in attack patterns, speed, projectiles, tactics, and the roguelite nature of the game keeps things interesting and varied. There are 3 bosses in each of the 4 dungeons, but really only 2 unique per dungeon since it's just a corrupted version of the first. So in total there's about 9 unique actual bosses, not counting the corrupted versions, and they all vary pretty wildly. You probably have to take the time to learn their attack patterns to take them down. I'm going to go ahead and mention it now. One of the things that I didn't like about Moonlighter is that the main boss of each dungeon does not respawn and instead is replaced by a challenge room. It's not the worst thing ever, but the negative seems to outweigh the positive for this decision. Not for the whole game, just for the respawning bosses. But overall, the combat is varied, engaging, and challenging, while still being pretty simple, and most importantly, it's fun. The bosses are really cool and unique from a design perspective, and while they are pretty challenging sometimes, it's still pretty accessible. The exploration is limited because the only places you can go are the dungeons and your town. But exploring the dungeons is really cool, and they did a great job of adding some mechanics to stand out. One of them is the amulet, which lets you teleport back home, ending your run in exchange for some gold. You keep all your items, but you have to start back at the beginning of the dungeon when you go back. If you die in the dungeon, you lose everything that is in your backpack, and you can try again without having to go back home first. This makes a pretty cool risk versus reward mechanic that makes you consider when to pack up and go home and when to risk it all. There are also some secret areas that you can spot going through the dungeon. Some of them let you send a chest worth of loot back home, so you can keep exploring while freeing up your inventory space and securing some loot. Later in the game, you unlock a cube that lets you teleport home, while also leaving a portal that you can go back into and pick up where you left off. But it costs way more gold, but sometimes it's worth it. Some of the more rare items that you find in chests are cursed, and it might be that they can only go in a certain spot in your backpack. It might be that they destroy an item that's to the left of them in your backpack. And then there are other items that can remove a curse altogether, or send one stack of loot back home. The variety of the curses was a pretty cool and creative way that added a lot of enjoyment to an otherwise possibly tedious task of inventory management, which made things much more enjoyable overall. If you take too long exploring the dungeons, going back through the rooms you already went through, a giant green ghost can start to stalk you, and while it's really slow and pretty easy to avoid, it can also smash treasure chests and loot, and makes clearing a new room pretty hectic. I know some people might not like this mechanic, but I thought it was a good way to add some sense of urgency when exploring really deep into the dungeons. The shop that you run, the Moonlighter, is another mechanic that I typically wouldn't think would be good in an action RPG roguelite, but man, I was definitely wrong. It adds a whole other layer on top of the game and really was the missing ingredient in a game like this. You start out with no knowledge on what items are worth and what people are willing to pay, so you have to try some different things, like looking in your notebook and trying different prices. After making some progress, you start to expand your store into a larger and better shop with more stands to sell stuff, more upgrades that can make people leave tips, make people walk faster, a store assistant, and more. You have to pay attention to your customers' reactions when they look at prices, because it'll help you adjust what the cost should be. 1,000 might be an angry face, 700 might be a disappointed sigh, so you might bring it to 500 to get it just right. Or you might price it way too low and their eyes light up gold because they just got a steal. Speaking of stealing, some thieves will make their way into your shop looking for an item to snatch. You have to watch out for them to make a move and then tackle them to get your item back. Or a bird could get into the store and distract all the customers from shopping. And again, you have to tackle the bird. The shop gameplay is a lot of fun, adding another enjoyable layer of progression and a great contrast to the dungeon crawling. Overall, Moonlighter is a fairly short game. I finished my first run in about 14 hours, but with the game only being $20 and it going on sale pretty frequently, I think it's well worth it. It's a great mix of roguelike action RPG and a town shop simulator. I appreciate you watching the video and staying until the end. If you enjoyed it, leaving a like helps my channel out a lot, and if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you want to see more from me, I post once every 2 weeks on Sunday, so I'll never clog up your feed. I hope you have a good one. Peace out.